Welcome to MediaTek Exec Talk, the podcast that keeps you at the forefront of today's most transformative technologies. Today, we're diving into the world of artificial intelligence. Anshel, principal analyst at Moor Insights and Strategy, sits down with MediaTek's Finbarr Moynihan and Mark Odani. Together, they discuss how AI is revolutionizing user experiences, from personalized interactions to smarter devices.
Hi, and welcome to the podcast. I'm joined by Finbarr Moynihan and Mark Odani, and we're going to be talking about AI. And I just want to say thanks for joining me, guys. How are you guys doing today?
Hey, great, Anshel.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Good to be with you.
But let's set the stage here, and can you possibly tell us what MediaTek's role is in AI as a chip company? Is there anything specific you guys are doing both in hardware and software to enable AI?
Maybe I'll take this one. Quite a lot, actually. I mean, I think AI is sort of touching pretty much everything we do, right? So I think the most obvious and probably what people are most familiar with is obviously we've been building out the capability to run AI applications so-called at the edge on the devices. So whether that's on smartphones or tablets or Chromebooks or now more and more in our automotive and IoT platforms as well. And we've been doing that for many, many years. More recently with the Dimensity 9400 flagship chips, we've also been, demonstrating the ability to run generative AI applications on the edge, right? With the integrated hardware, our so-called NPU for accelerating the AI applications, and with our software SDK that enables that as well. So that kind of capability runs across all of the platforms for the edge that we support. We also have a lot of activity these days in sort of custom silicon for the infrastructure, the cloud, and the data center. So that's another big focus for us. But that's kind of a special business, of course. And even internally, we're using AI for productivity tools from software development, chip development, even those of us in the marketing teams are using it for increasing our own productivity as well.
Great. And Mark, if you could possibly tell me, I heard Finbarr mention, NPUs in passing. Could you possibly tell us how it became so powerful and efficient inside of MediaTek's SoCs?
Sure. So, the NPUs, we designed a long time ago. We used to call it the MDLA, which is MediaTek Deep Learning Accelerator. So it's basically this hardware piece that's, processing all of the AI, right, as a dedicated unit inside of the chips. And we started out with the smartphones, right? So for smartphones, you kind of have like filtering, you have like classification, biometric authentication, stuff like that. And our first MDLA was, it kind of seems funny now, but it was like 1.6 tops, and 4 tops per watt. So it seems like nothing now, but at that time it was a big thing. So now you fast forward to, whatever it is, 7 years later, 5, 6, 7 years later, and our NPUs now are running like 18 tops, tera operations per second. And we're at like 11 tops per watt. So which is very, very efficient. Efficiency comes from our DNA as a smartphone chipset provider where battery life is very, very important. So, on the performance side, we've got all this new generative AI type of applications, video analysis, concurrent, multi-video AI that needs that performance. But then we still have that efficiency because we're, at edge devices like smartphones and tablets where battery consumption and power consumption is very, very important. So those two things mixed together, that's how we came up with this very powerful NPU in our chipsets, but also remaining very power efficient.
And, NPUs are obviously designed for continuous use, low power. And one of the applications that seems to be gaining some momentum is agentic AI. Mm-hmm. And we're starting to see more talk about large action models as well. How do you see agentic AI evolving in the near future?
Yeah, I think we're in that phase. Like, we tend to look at the AI evolution in the edge or on the devices sort of in 3 phases. We've been using AI for many, many years on our platforms, including smartphones and others, but mostly kind of traditional AI for things like computational photography, improving the noise floor, the quality of cameras. Then, 2023, 2024, we've sort of seen the age of Gen AI or running generative AI. going forward next year, for the next couple of years, we see this as the age of agentic AI. So that might be a new term for some of the listeners. What we really mean is like running a smart AI agent on your device, right? Sort of think of it as a personal butler or a personal helper or a personal assistant. Runs on your device, knows your preferences, knows your applications, knows what you do on a regular basis or what you want to do. And then can process complex multimodal requests, voice, text, images, whatever, and take action on those, right? So it's really kind of a much more natural way of speaking to something. And then the idea is that you have this sort of agent structure on the device, as I said, knows your data, knows your preferences, and then is able to go out to the cloud as necessary to take action to book a trip, book a hotel, book a restaurant, make certain actions on your behalf, whether it's shopping or healthcare or work or whatever. And so we think, over the next couple of years, devices, applications, the apps ecosystem are going to evolve to include more of this capability natively built in.
That's great. And you talked a little bit in that answer, but I wanted to know if there were some of the latest applications of AI beyond agentic AI that most consumers might be unaware of, but might be right under their noses today.
Yeah, so, for a lot of the applications, they actually are right under your nose. Everything from, the content recommendations you get on Spotify and Netflix and YouTube to like more like unknown things like, energy efficiency in your battery for your devices is being controlled by AI, that power consumption. They also look at like different apps that you're using and kind of figure out which apps are, more open more often and not open more often. And then they can basically store some of those apps in, memory that's not being used, right? The other thing is individual profiles. So you can have different individual profiles, let's say in your electric vehicle, right? And it can learn all of your habits about how you're driving your car for each of the different drivers and come up with different individual profiles. And even things like AI-powered screen brightness, right? AI-powered, enhanced noise cancellation on microphones. And you can even see, like, when you're typing your emails, you can see keyboard and typing predictions and autocorrect and next word predictions. So there's a lot of things going on that are driven by AI right now, whether it's on device or, in the cloud, that people don't know about.
And I guess as a follow-up question, do you think there will be a point where we don't talk about AI just because everything is AI?
Yeah, I mean, even right now, right, there's a lot of things going on, like your movie selections and whatnot, that we don't really talk about, right? We don't talk about that it's providing you all the recommendations for your latest songs and concerts that you might want to go. We don't talk about it at all. We don't even consider it AI. We just think it's a recommendation. So it's already happening, it's already happening.
And I think that's the goal, really, of this agentic trend, right? Is that this becomes, so capable, so smart that it sort of is this usefulness that's in the background, doing a lot of complicated things for you, but we're not going to be talking about it as an AI thing. We're going to be talking about it as your personal assistant or your agent or your whatever you want to call it, right? That's sort of just making your devices more useful for you, right?
That's like the internet. We don't talk about the internet anymore. We talk about all the things that sit on top of it.
Good analogy.
Yeah. Speaking of things that are powering things, I wanted to talk about models and LLMs and SLMs and vision models, and what are some of the challenges you see with enabling these on smartphones and IoT devices?
I think the obvious one is memory, right? So obviously we've had this trend of large language models, and so last year on our flagship smartphone we were demonstrating 7, 13, even as large as 33 billion parameter large language models. And there's sort of two trends, right? Some of the models are getting larger, some of the models are getting smaller and more optimized for embedded and on-device applications. Either way, there's still a sizable amount of memory required for these models. So I think that's first and foremost the challenge of how do you use the tools, compress, quantize, and anything else you can do to reduce the size of memory that's required to store those models. Of course, Mark touched on this earlier as well. The larger the models, the more processing is needed, and that's also sort of feeds into the power consumption. So again, having efficient on-chip NPUs that are low power, that can stay on, run continuously, and run these models is also a challenge, particularly for battery powered applications like smartphones and some other, tablets, Chromebooks, those kind of things. So I think those are probably the two main factors. Maybe beyond that, you get into like, the SDKs, the software, how developers can take advantage of the models that are tuned to run on, our hardware, for example.
And as a follow-up to that question, what do you think is holding back the implementation of newer AI applications for developers? Like, what are the biggest challenges for developers in making AI possible?
I mean, I think I still kind of have to remind ourselves that we're sort of a year into this Gen AI capability on edge devices, so it's still very early, right? But I think things are moving, right? So what we've seen, at least early on, is in the smartphone market, if I can take that as an example, a lot of our OEM customers are doing in-house development, right? Because obviously they're launching the phone, and then they're launching the device with a whole bunch of Gen AI applications already built in by them as part of the experience that they want to deliver to consumers. It takes, of course, a little longer with the developer ecosystem, although, that's also starting as well. But it's important that companies like ourselves put out, the right hardware, that we've done the work with the model providers to make sure those models are optimized and tuned for our platform. And then that we have an SDK or a developer environment that people can actually write to, right? So we already have that for, traditional AI, Gen AI applications. When we launched Dimensity 9400, we were also launching a framework for agentic applications. So again, trying to make that standardized on our platform, trying to make that easy for people to use so that, the framework is there. They can focus on the magic that goes into the application on top, I think is what needs to happen. But it's happening. It just takes time for all the stuff to kind of, consolidate, standardize, and roll out.
And I wanted to kind of build on some of what you had talked about on earlier. MediaTek has a very strong presence in IoT and smartphones, but how is supporting AI in IoT different from supporting it in smartphones?
Yeah, so for IoT, it's obviously a very generic term, but usually you think of them as IoT devices as being a lot more task specific, sensors with very limited amounts of compute, making sure that they're connected so that they can communicate with the internet or with each other, right? So if we define it that way, the problems are the same as smartphone, but with a lot more limited resources and also different types of inputs, like different types of sensors. And what can be processed on device is going to be usually a lot less than what you can do on smartphones. And a big issue with IoT devices is interoperability, right? As you know, it's kind of been notorious that IoT devices don't really talk to each other or have to be on different hubs or different networks in order to connect to the internet. So that's also a big problem for IoT devices. But we're solving that, with things like Thread and Matter that we'll support on our connectivity devices. And so we're basically taking the partition of the AI that can be done on device and IoT devices is going to be limited much more by the compute that's on the IoT device and also the connectivity that's there as well.
And do you see that there's like a different balance for how AI is performed in terms of where the compute is versus IoT and smartphone?
Yeah, sure. I think in the smartphone case, there's a lot more capability there. So you can do a lot more. I mean, you can run entire, large language models, right, on the smartphone. Whereas, in the AI, IoT case, right, you might just have more traditional AI and maybe a little bit of generative AI. Like you might have a camera outside that can identify, a human versus, a dog or a cat, right? Or something like that. And you can process that on the camera and then just send some text or, something to the cloud. Whereas in the phone, right, you can actually identify, you can actually, do labeling, you can actually do more applications on the video, right, on device, and maybe not even have to send any of it to the cloud. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely how I see it happening. I guess to your point, memory is a big challenge with enabling AI, and I was wondering how you guys see that being addressed by MediaTek or your partners to making it more accessible.
Yeah, as we mentioned, that's obviously one of the challenges in all applications. But I think there's a few things that we are and the ecosystem are doing to sort of move us in the right direction here. So, at the most basic level, MediaTek, we have our AI SDK. We call it Neuropilot, and that tool set, that SDK, has all of the standard tools built in from the AI world: quantization, scaling, reducing the size of the models. That, everybody does that, right? But that has to be done, and that's sort of a natural thing. With the launch of the Dimensity 9300, was we introduced some other compression technology on the chip. The way that works is our tools do a further compression of the models, as part of the tools. So what you store in memory is reduced by another factor, another, you know, reduction in memory. And then on chip, we have a hardware decompression that sort of reconstructs that as the memory is being brought onto the chip. So that can save against some significant memory for any particular model that's out there. But I think the other trend that I'm sure you and everyone else is seeing as well is, we're not necessarily going up to larger and larger sizes of models, right? But there's sort of this trend of using a smaller language models or smaller sized models, but perhaps multiple models to do different things rather than one large model. So I think that trend is driven more by the big developers of those models, right? That are bringing those more optimized models as well, which I think is also supporting the adoption of more of this capability, on device at the edge, because it can do, certain functions very, very well. And you may not necessarily need to keep going to the billions and billions and billions of parameters to try to do everything in one generic model. So I think there's things that we as device makers and chip makers can do. There's things that the large language models and the ecosystem are doing as well to help with this challenge that we have.
Great. And I was wondering, you talked about models, obviously. So model support is extremely important. And MediaTek has done a great job of enabling new models, including Meta's latest Llama 3.2. How do you guys stay on top of these things and, always be at the forefront, getting acknowledged in press releases on the day of?
Yeah, so we actually have an entire organization. It's our AI organization, and there's several divisions within it. And it's dedicated to doing everything from, all of our tools that, we develop for ourselves and for developers, to like what Finbarr was just talking about, doing optimization of all the models so that they can work on our NPUs in our smartphones and in our other devices. And on top of that, the teams, actually, we have our own AI applications that we make in-house. We call it Da Vinci. And we have teams that are actually making our own AI applications that we use and we actually offer to other businesses in Taiwan. So these teams are all prioritizing, different models to port to our devices. And, a lot of it is based on what our customer needs are. And so that's what we're doing. And that's how we prioritize. And then we optimize and make sure that these all work on the NPUs, maintaining the versions of them that, are of highest priority. It's kind of like maintaining different OSs for our smartphone chipsets. Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful because, I've been obviously tracking all of the different silicon vendors in the space, and I've been really impressed with how, on the ball you guys have been with all of these latest models. And, I was at MetaConnect, and, you guys were right up there in the press release with everybody else. So I was just really impressed by that. I think, Finbarr, you had something to say too?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think it works both ways, right? We obviously have to work with the Metas, the Googles, the Microsofts, as well as like Ali and Bytron and Baidu and the big suppliers in China. And we have, as Mark said, we have teams that work with those organizations just to make sure that, as they're launching new models, we're obviously getting access early. We can then, work internally to optimize the port to our hardware so that once they launch, it's ready to go for whatever the different platform is. But, I think given our scale of products, not just in smartphones, but across all these other device categories, IoT, tablets, home, TV, automotive, etc., that we supply, we're obviously, well positioned to help scale the adoption of these models as well, which is in those companies' interests, right? So it works both ways, but it certainly takes some time, some resources, and some priority from our side to make that happen.
Yeah, it definitely, it looks seamless, but I know there's a lot of coordination and
There's a
partnerships that
lot.
have to occur
Yeah, it's the swan.
to
It's the
make it
swan
look
on the.
easy.
It's the swan on the lake, right? It's make it look elegant on top and paddle furiously underneath.
Yeah, and I think, these discussions around models are really important, but I also think there's a lot of discussion around security and privacy when it comes to AI, and I'd love to know what you guys are doing to safeguard both consumers and enterprises' security and privacy.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack there too. Like, so, we have within the company a dedicated security organization that's continuously looking at the security architecture of, all of our new SOCs. And as you know well, that's just an ongoing battle of staying ahead of that all the time, right? So whether that is, you know, staying on top of any breaches or things that need to be patched or secured, or designing the chip architecture from the ground up, hardware and software, to be much more secure. So that's a kind of an evolving path that we're very focused on, just to make sure that the platforms are secure for all different kinds of applications. Of course, when it comes to AI, we also believe strongly that the trend of moving more of this stuff on device, so that your personal information, your information, the things that define you, don't necessarily need to leave your device and go to the cloud, right? We also believe that, for hybrid models, there will always be some aspect in the cloud. So again, having the right framework, having the right architecture where the stuff that can be done on device stays on device, I think is very, very critical to this sort of privacy and security. People don't necessarily want their pictures being used, up there somewhere else. So if you can sort of keep that on device, I think that's what also fuels each new generation of NPU and on-device capability to be able to do more on device. And then I would say the third aspect, of course, is we work with the OEMs and the ecosystems, because they also have a vested interest in ensuring that the platforms and the devices that they put out are secure. So we will follow and support what they need to do as well in the getting stuff to the consumer at the end of the day.
Great. I guess to wrap things up, I wanted to ask each of you right now, who do you think is doing the most interesting things in AI? And are there any AI product segments you're most interested in enabling? And I'll start with Mark.
Yeah, so, to me, I think autonomous driving and these humanoid robots using AI is very interesting to me. I'm a Tesla owner, so, full self-driving is not perfect yet. But the fact that, a couple of weeks ago, we took a Waymo cab in San Francisco, and there's no driver in the driver's seat, it seems a little odd, but I think that will become, the norm. And it would probably be odd later on for humans to be driving, cars and vehicles. And then also, going to the advent of all these humanoid robots who'll be able to navigate the world because of all the learning that they're doing with AI. I think that's amazing. Beyond that, I'm really interested in all of the advances made using AI for healthcare and for anti-aging. I mean, we've got AlphaFold, right? That's kind of solved a lot of these, protein folding problems. And I think that, we're going to get a lot more personalized, targeted healthcare and prevention and just looking at, the human lifespan as holistically, right? To keep you healthy for longer. Those things are pretty amazing to me, and I think that's gonna just explode over the next few years.
And Finbar?
I think I'm pretty excited about this agentic AI trend. I mean, maybe selfishly, like, it's going to make all of our lives better, right? So, like, make us more productive, make us, maybe gain back some time in this, crazy busy world that we all live in, and like have sort of some of these tasks that are a little bit more mundane, offloaded to the AI agent. And I think that's going to evolve quite quickly over the next year or two, and then we're going to see that really sort of deploying in devices. Inevitably, the way the world works, that's going to deploy in, high-end flagship models first of all, right? So, I think we, more than anyone, really brings this technology out to everybody. So I think over the next couple of years, I'm also interested to see how we can enable some of this capability into, mid-range devices and devices that go into other markets, so that this doesn't become, a capability that's, only available in $1,000 phones for, affluent consumers in certain markets, right? So I think, obviously it deploys first at the high end, but, we've got to figure out as a technology supplier, how do we scale this? It doesn't necessarily mean that you have the same performance, but can you bring some of this value, some of this capability, to people who are buying a $200 phone in some other market, right? That's where I think the real magic is going to come in the next maybe 3 to 5 years.
Interesting. I could see how, having AI enable low power acceleration of features and a very small NPU could actually up level the mainstream smartphone market considerably.
Exactly.
It's an interesting
Exactly.
concept.
Yeah. And I think, we all understand that, it takes a dedicated hardware to run the NPU, as we talked about. It takes memory. But, the flagship smartphones are also defined by much larger computing, much larger gaming, much larger graphics capability that, you wouldn't necessarily need in, a phone to try to hit a different price point, right? You still have memory, you still have some other cost issues that you have to address. It's not free.
Sure.
But I think that's where, we're really going to unlock some interesting different use cases. When you think about how much of the internet is in the English language, right, versus other languages, right? What kind of divides is that going to break down in the next 5-10 years, right?
Yeah, that's very thoughtful, and I appreciate both of you guys giving me these great answers and talking about AI. And I've enjoyed this podcast. I hope you guys have too. And again, thanks again to Finbarr and Mark for joining us today.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Anshel.
thank you, Anshel.
It's good. It's good discussion.